be kind to yourself. And I think this comes in the context of relationship. So, for example, if something is hard for you, do not hate yourself for it. Do not push yourself. Be kind. Take your time, take your space, breathe, reflect, come back. If something is not working in your relationship and you're like, oh my God, I should probably be breaking up, but I really don't want to, don't. Wait, see, breathe, look into yourself, look into what's going on. Be kind to yourself. And if you don't do something perfectly, if you don't have a perfect relationship, or even if you don't have a relationship, it's okay. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself, and these things will happen to you.
Welcome to the Sound of You podcast. This is a space where we have inspiring, thoughtful conversations about the voice, about healthy self-expression, and all things spirituality and personal growth. My name is Friederike. I am your host, and I am so excited that you're here. Let's get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a new episode of the Sound of You podcast. And today it's going to be all about the sound of Ruta. I invited my dear friend Ruta Ka to this podcast. She is absolutely glorious. She is probably my number one go-to person when it's about relationships and untangling things and dynamics that I personally don't really get. But there's so many things that she knows how to do. And she said, let me introduce myself because it's quite a mouthful to say and I've practiced it. So welcome and thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Fedi. I'm so happy to be part of this and I love working with you. And yes, indeed, I asked to introduce myself because it is a bit of mouthful. So these days, I call myself a female coach, emotional well-being practitioner, trauma integration specialist, and holistic womb healing enthusiast. A bit of mouthful if you don't practice, huh?
It's amazing. Before we continue this conversation with Ruta, which is going to be all about healthy relationships, what things are work-throughable and when it would be time to leave. We also talk about jealousy, codependency, and we bust some myths that are going around, especially in the spiritual and personal development community about relationships. So before we continue with that, I want to make you aware what you can actually get from me. So I'm an emotional healing practitioner. I'm a voice activation coach. I work with integrative trauma methods, Reiki healing, energy healing, channeling, and all of that will have you walk through life with more conviction, confidence, trust, and as a nice side effect, with much, much healthier relationships. And if that's not enough, you will also learn how to sing. It's amazing. Can you say, what is the common thread between all of those that you just said?
So I think it's basically our subconscious patterns and blocks. So in any aspect of those female coaching, emotional integration, trauma integration, womb healing, femininity, if those things are not really flowing, there is something in our subconscious, there is something in our patterns that we have which needs to be fixed, or let's say just aligned again and harmonized. So I would say harmonizing the things that are not working is the common thread in all of those practices and the things that I do.
Yeah. I was thinking the other day how we actually met, and it was 4.5 years ago. We were both assisting Teal Swan and training new completion process practitioners. And I think during the training, we didn't actually speak that very much. But what happened then afterwards is that my boyfriend at the time broke up with me, or we broke up. And for some reason, you were there. And I remember that we were sitting there in this cafe, and I shared with you all this turmoil and all the thoughts that I was going through. And with just a few simple words, you were saying, oh, yeah, this makes sense. It's like this and like that. And this is the dynamic and this is the pattern. And I was just like, damn, that's so true. Has it always been like that? Or when did you become so interested and skilled at looking through patterns?
I think skill comes from purpose, practicing of something that you are interested in and you are drawn to. And part of it for me was unconscious. I think majority of the learning or the database of my learning was from my own miserable experiences, especially when it comes to relationship, especially when it comes in romantic relationships. I have been desperate and I have been so on the road to go and get myself a happy relationship ever since I remember, like since school age, then all through my 20s, and I could never really align with it. And I started kind of see that there are some things that I keep on repeating, and that's when I became interested in psychology, in emotional well-being. And I think because I was so interested in figuring out what is going on for me, and I was reading books and watching videos, podcasts, and everything like a maniac, I think I I generated this database and wealth of knowledge, which I then was able to share with other people because, like, oh yeah, that I know. Oh yeah, this makes sense. I think it kind of just through my own, I guess, difficult experiences, I was drawn in learning that, and then I found this is something that helps to everybody.
You are originally from Lithuania and you moved to England when?
I moved in England in 2004, so it's been 18 years. Actually, it's just turned 18 years. And yes, it was probably, I was 20 back then. And when you leave your birth country at the age of 20, completely on your own, without friends, without anyone, let me tell you, you are put through some tough lessons in your life, not just the language, but the culture, the situations, the community. So yeah, I've been living in UK since 2004, so 18 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
I think I remember one time that you told me when you moved to the UK that you also said, I would never be together with a Lithuanian man again.
Yes. Yes. One of the reasons why I moved is because I had a terrible heartbreak in Lithuania. And back then in 2004, it was European Union opening up borders, and it was quite fashionable for people from Lithuania go to somewhere in Europe, also in Germany, in Ireland, in UK, and kind of like just have a year out, work, save some money, or learn the language and then come back. So I use that as an excuse. And because I had such a bad and painful experience with the guys back in Lithuania, and the guys in UK were completely different in some sense. There is a huge cultural difference. There is, at least at that point, it looked like a day and night for me. Then I started dating guys who lived in UK, and I was like, no, never ever again I go back to dating a Lithuanian guy. And you know how that ended for me.
What are some of those differences that you saw in the guys or in the relationship culture?
So I think back in Lithuania, there was this. Okay, I'm not gonna censor myself. I'm just gonna like go
Go
purely
for
my
it.
opinion, like purely my opinion from my point of view, subjective reality. Quite, let's say, chauvinistic type of man culture is like, if you're a woman, then you must be beautiful and you must also work and you must also earn money and you also must be sexual and you must be slim and you must look good all the time and you must cook the food and you must clean all the house. So you must do all of those things. And it's just so much pressure. It's just so much pressure. And in UK, because it's kind of like a more, I guess, westernized, obviously now I know there are pluses and the minuses in every single culture, but the difference as well, like, oh, would you like to come to date for me? Would you be interested in that? So maybe it was the way the words were put out, or maybe because there was no big presumptions and assumptions about what I, in the role of a girlfriend or a woman, am obliged to do. It felt way more freer because in UK you could also see there is a whole range of type of relationships that you have, and you will not be judged. For example, I was always rubbish at cooking. So if you are rubbish at cooking, you're not gonna have a instantaneous minus as a girlfriend, because that sometimes is just not an issue at all. So yeah, so those were the differences that I can see. I felt most strongly back then, and
Mhm.
that's why I said that I will never ever date a Lithuanian guy again.
Which now you are.
So in Lithuania, actually, we have this saying, "Never say never,"
Yeah, same.
and yeah, you have one too. I think I was actually, this kind of also brings me back to the type of work that I do about relationships, traumas, and patterns. I think I was pretty traumatized by my culture, by my environment, by the patterns that exist in the relationship. And like in any journey, in any healing journey, in any journey where you try to escape yourself, try to escape some painful situation because you don't want to deal with it, you come full circle. And at some point, that thing that you've been running away from comes to you. So right now, I am in a good, solid, awesome, amazing, fantastic relationship with the Lithuanian guy. It's been the best relationship and the longest relationship that I ever had. And we got on really well. That's not to say there were no challenges, and that's not to say that there are no challenges. But on the plus side, I think, when you go into that, let's say, whirlpool of the feelings or situation where you've been so scared of and you deal with it, you sometimes find this level of satisfaction, level of growth, level of achievement that you would not be able to have otherwise if you were just isolating yourself. I'm just gonna be with people who don't cause me any problems and don't force me to change in any way. I'm just gonna be surround myself with a circle of people who approve me, and if they disagree with me, then I'm gonna step out. That's the setup to never change, never improve, be stuck in your bubble. And I think relationship is exactly the opposite of that. I think good relationship is something that breaks your bubble and gives you access to the bubble of the other person. You have some overlaps in your bubbles. And there are some changes in your bubbles that you need to make if you want this common bubble to work.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that description. I heard the quote once, or someone said, I think one of the biggest ways in which we spiritually bypass, or I guess we could also say escaping growth, is through people, is through just exactly what you just said, like staying in our bubble, surrounding ourselves with people who are just quote unquote like us, and then if they divert from that, we leave. But if you want a solid long-term relationship, you can't be doing that. Like, of course you will like someone, and of course you will find similarities with the person you're attracted to. But once you stay with that person, sooner or later, you will find those differences. And if you are in this pattern of like, oh, okay, I'm going to leave, like, how are you going to build that intimacy that you want ultimately?
Exactly. And I think me and you, we are kind of very much on board about, I guess, progressive relationships. So you guys, girls who are listening to this podcast, you don't know about our intimate conversations, which we had, like a 10, 15 minutes exchanges of voice notes. I actually find you one of a few people who understands the notion of growth in relationships, the healthy growth, also the solidity of relationships, which means you don't escape every single time is hard. You don't just blame the other person or just yourself if something is not working. You don't say relationship cannot work and is impossible because you have some differences, especially when the painful things are being triggered, especially when the painful, very painful things are triggered. That's when it is the most important to, first of all, have this confidence in yourself that I can be with this. And then second, have this confidence in the relationship. We can have this and we can still be in this. I find that trust and confidence in self, in a relationship, and in the fact that difficult things, in fact, believe that there might be difficult things in a relationship, but it actually might be something that is possible to work through, is kind of like a secret of long lasting and solid relationship. And it's not easy. It's not easy all the time. But I think it takes certain type of personality as well to have the guts, to have the courage to be in that sort of vulnerability and, to go through those depths and also sometimes those uncomfortable periods that we have to.
I guess it sometimes comes as a shock when we see those differences. That just came to me because when we fall in love with someone or we get interested in someone, and I was recently writing a post about how when we have been single for a long time and maybe we are in this sort of environment, be that a spiritual community or we're really much into personal growth, and we hear all these things of like these partnerships where everything is just perfect, and we go through life together and we do everything together. And so then when you finally meet someone, all these expectations land on that person. And of course, the first weeks, months, maybe even are great, but I think sometimes maybe it comes as a shock, like, oh my God, okay, this is not it. And then we have to run. I once read this quote. It went like the most challenging thing about a marriage, say a relationship, is accepting the fact that the other is just so different from us. And I remember when I read it, I was like, that's bullshit, because I was very much still into this, like, no, my relationship is going to be perfect. Like, what is that even? Of course, and I'm not going to have this difficulty. This is not going to be a challenge. But now I'm like, well, it depends on your perspective. If you see it as a terrible thing, like a challenge that you have to really work through and it's like so much effort, or if it's like, no, this is just how he or she is different from me. And we learn how to work and navigate with that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also think there is kind of like a widespread disease in spiritual community about relationship. And I actually been there too. It's almost like it feels like the sentence goes like, you are the best. You deserve the best. You deserve the person who treats you right. You should never put up with someone who makes you cry. Then if he doesn't give you what you want, leave, find someone better. And I can see from my own experience, you can do that infinitely. You can do that forever, and you can have, I don't know, 120 relationship for the rest of your life, never really landing, never really landing with someone in a solid partnership. Because I think there is some, you know, illusion and fantasy going on about how the real relationship looks like because of all of that positive thinking. Oh, I'm connected with my higher self, this is my spirit, blah blah blah. But hey, in a real life all of us have wounding. In a real life all of us have some patterns and some characteristics that might be not fluffy and rosy and beautiful. We have some qualities that are not easy for other people to have. So why would we expect to find someone who's going to be such a like a silk and smooth and and as you know, as I know, that usually people who put on this absolutely fluffy, beautiful front has lots of internal shadows going on about suppressing some of the things. I think that thing that you said, like it takes few weeks and then after weeks or months of being in a relationship after the start, we like, oh my God, we are so different. Yes, we all are different. And then also it comes as a shock that this is not just this dreamy walk in a park that we imagine this is going to be with the holding hands and looking at the stars and the kisses in the moonlight and the roses at home every single time you come back with the cooked dinners. I don't know, maybe somebody has a life like that. Uh, I want to know. Let yourself be known. If you have something like that, guys, tell us. We want to know.
The question that I keep hearing, though, that people will ask is, where is the line then? Like, where is a relationship really unhealthy for me? And where should I leave? Like, is everything work throughable? Or like, because it can't mean that then I have to put up with XYZ behavior forever. Like, where would you say is that line?
I say it's workable as long as you think and feel it's workable. But at the same time, I think when at the point of stuckness is always like if something is not changing and not changing and not changing and not changing, and you feel yourself more and more miserable, you try to find a way, you try to find a way, you try to find a way, and it's still not changing, then it might be, something that you may look in. Maybe it's not just me. Maybe it's you too. Maybe this is not a good combo. I think there are lots of things that are workable, and I think there are lots of things that can be worked through. It's very individual at the same time, for some person who might be ultra sensitive and very, let's say, absorbing any kind of like a stresses and feeling highs and lows to the extreme level, it might not be easy to stay in, let's say, a relationship which is not so easy flowing. It might be not so easy as for another person who might have a bit more solid or stronger internal self concept. So I think it's very individual. At the same time, I also think it depends on the other person. Are you doing all work yourself? Are there any changes? Are there any improvements? Also, there is this good rule which I heard is like, if you are happy in relationship 70-80%, or if you are happy with the things that are going on in a relationship 70-80% on an average, that's a good relationship, because you don't, like, 100% is unrealistic, unattainable, and you need to have some grit to work through. So overall, I think relationship must make you feel fuller, make you feel like you grow. It should not take away from your confidence. having said that, it might take away from your confidence sometimes on a temporary basis. For example, like even in my current relationship, sometimes when there is some conflict, I remember a couple of years ago, there was some inadequacy that was um, triggered. And with these things, you feel it, you talk about it, then you do some internal work, and then at some point, it's actually resolved. And that thing is not keep on going down. You actually newly find yourself, you actually break through some limiting, let's say, belief about yourself. Also, sometimes you detach. There are so many things we can talk about, but also like even recognizing, okay, is this thing that is hurting me in relationship is the thing that is hurting me in relationship, or it's a pattern which I brought from the childhood and now I am projecting on my partner to want to have what I didn't have in my childhood, and I'm feeling hurt because my mommy or daddy is not giving me that. I think self-awareness is amazing tool, and there is no hard rule in a relationship. But I would say if there would be one rule, I would say as a result of relationship, as relationship progresses overall, you shouldn't feel less, you should feel more. If you feel more, that means relationship is good and valuable, and even there are some difficulties, there is some growth in there. If you feel less and less and less, somehow is not good, probably in the long term.
Yeah. And I guess violence, I guess we would agree on
Oh,
that.
oh yeah, yeah. I didn't even mention that, but I would think so too. What do you think is that limit? That's very interesting question.
It's very individual, as you said. Violence is definitely like zero tolerance for that. Someone said to me once that you can leave when you're also okay with not leaving. Meaning that you first look at yourself, like you were describing, with your own patterns, and you really dig deep and you try to understand and resolve things on your side, and also align with what you want on your side, because it's not always like oh, I'm attracting something negative, but it's, am I open to something positive? I did some inner work yesterday, and it was just an inquiry process where I was just writing down, and the statement that came out that really made me cry is that I am afraid of not being able to feel celebrated, to let myself feel celebrated. And like, I can still feel it, but it feels different today now than it felt yesterday. And it's like, well, of course, like, how would other people really celebrate me? Or even if they did, I wouldn't feel it. Like, if I'm not open to receive it and feel it, I will not feel it. So if you can really find that alignment within yourself, and then come to a point where somehow you release this resistance, so you're not leaving because anyway, it's all shit, and anyway, he's not fulfilling my needs, and he's not this or she's not that. When that is no longer there and it doesn't have such a grip, and you're in a calm place, like, then it's okay. When it's okay to also stay, then you can also leave, but it's a different inner place. Sorry, what you said about confidence, like 100%, if people can look through gaslighting, but often we notice that too late. Like, that happened to me in one of my relationships that I only understood recently, where it's like, that's actually what happened. I went through gaslighting because I kept saying, I don't know what happened to me in this relationship. My confidence, like you were saying, my confidence was completely crumbled in so many areas of my life. And I guess that's a warning sign. When I see that also with friends, when they're in a situation where they're constantly questioning themselves, constantly worrying whether they did or said something wrong, that's a big red flag for me.
So I agree with you. And And I have something to add. I had made a contract with myself that I am working through things out. If there is something I don't want, I need to work through that pattern first. Then I can change my circumstances. I can find someone else, or, but work through the pattern itself, because the rule is, if you're not going to work through some pattern, it's going to come back to you again. It's going to come back to you again. It's going to come back to you again. It's just a pattern. So, the thing is, like, for example, self-questioning yourself, it's a red flag. However, at the same time, sometimes it could be that person is questioning themselves and they need to actually start being more confident. Some relationships, so from the higher perspective, I believe, we have, let's say, soul contracts, or we have some kind of like a life intentions. There are some experiences that we need to go through, and some people that we get in our lives, they actually trigger these things with a purpose for us to look at these things. And for example, like, okay, if I'm questioning myself and I'm questioning myself, of course, what you said about gaslighting, for sure. Gaslighting and manipulation. I think when there is no good intention from the other party, when it becomes like evident that, hey, that guy doesn't really want good for you, or that woman doesn't really value you, or they don't really root for you, they don't really support you, they somehow want to put you down, that's kind of like an obvious thing. At the same time, I think there are huge leaps possible when in a partnership both parties, they become aware. I know it's not really that common, because our dream is like, oh my god, I want to find a partner who's as conscious as me, but hey, we attract often the suppressed and the opposite. So if we are super mega ultra conscious, we're gonna attract someone who may not be on that level of awareness and the conscious. But I think the ability to take responsibility for own actions, both actions, one partner takes responsibility for their actions. So yeah, okay, you know what, I've been putting you down, I'm sorry about it, actually I've been feeling bad about myself and I've been doing this to you, I can see that. And from the other side, actually I can see that I am not bad, I don't need to be put down. In fact, when you feel like that, just tell me you feel like that, don't put me down. So there are some, I think, solutions that can work. I'm not saying every single case scenario will work. It really depends on both people involved in the relationships, and if they want to have a good quality relationships, if they want good things for each other, if they want growth, and if they want improvement. So again, it's like, it's so difficult to kind of just to say this is proper hard rule, but I think exactly what you said, the violence, the gaslighting, the manipulation, and I think when you over time feel less as a person, like this scale kind of like goes down, is also a sign that probably is not supportive for your well-being, for your growth, for your development.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I just want to say here, like you mentioned, communicating with the other, right? Of course, that's like a huge thing as well. Like you have to learn how to talk. And for some people, that's the biggest challenge. And something came to me the other day about, the quote that you just mentioned, like, your partner has to do this and has to do that. And especially there was a spiritual meme going around, I don't know, last year, but it keeps coming up every once and so often. It's two people sitting at a date at a table, and one person asks the other, so how are you dealing with your unconscious fears and your inner child, and how are you healing your patterns? And to say like, this would be the ideal conversation on a date, if your partner can answer that. And I was thinking recently, that is so arrogant. And it's really one-sided, because what I have learned is that just because someone is not into healing, just because someone is not into that kind of inner work and personal growth that you do, doesn't mean that they're not growing and not healing. It's just that every person does it differently. My partner, for example, I don't know how he does it, but he does. Sometimes I know, sometimes we talk about things and go through things together, like, of course, but most of his transformations kind of happen in silence. And if I was in that space where I was like, tell me which methods you work with, because if you don't do this kind of thing, then sorry, I'm out. It's like I would have missed out on that relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were talking about patterns a few times, and I'm curious if you want to share what were some of the biggest challenges that you had, like some of the patterns that you discovered in yourself for someone who's like, what are these patterns everyone's talking about? What does that mean?
Okay, I can say probably my biggest challenge and the strongest pattern to overcome was the codependency. Codependency, for those who don't know, looks like you are the hyper aware, you are the hyper vigilant, you are so attuned with your, let's say, partner, boyfriend, the object of your desires. You are mega, ultra kind of sacrificing everything else. You only put their needs first. Anything they want, anything they need, every single word they say is the most important. It happens unconsciously. It's like a flipping the switch. You become like, it's gonna sound bad, but you become like this dog. You become like this dog for the master. It's like, my master came back home. Okay, now I'm happy. Oh no, my master is not home. I'm not happy. Oh, my master said I'm a good dog. I'm happy. Oh, my master disappointed in me. I'm not happy. So, in a funny way to put it, is like that. But I think internally it feels horrible because it feels like the minute you get in a relationship with someone, you have this string, huge string rope attaching you to that person, and you can feel every single movement, every single tension, every single change in the mood, everything you take as your fault or because of me. And it's just such a heavy experience, and it's such an uncomfortable experience. So for me, that was, I was bouncing from being in love, dating, and completely not dating, not seeing anyone, then being in love, dating, and then completely out of it, because every single time I experience that codependently heavy type of pattern in relationship, I was like, I'm never gonna do this again. I will never go into it again. So for me, that was actually the strongest, the most difficult, most painful pattern to actually integrate.
Were you aware at the times that was happening that that was happening? No.
No, no, I wasn't.
And what made you aware of it?
I think at some point I learned about the codependency, but I think later on I actually learned about attachment styles. So anxious attachment style, secure attachment style, avoidant attachment style, disorganized attachment style. For me, so it wasn't super new concept, but that thing really hit the nail where it needed to be hit to understand, oh, okay, so I actually need to go not where I feel this anxiety and the pull, but I need to go in a partnership where I feel secure, more neutral, more safe. Because I think lots of people, they confuse. I think lots of women, especially women, they confuse. I have these butterflies and nerves going through all of my body. It must be it. You know what I say? If you have these nerves and butterflies coming in every single time when the phone rings and everything, it probably means you have some pattern being activated. It's probably anxiety. The you know, so I think self-awareness, reading about it, learning about it, and mostly of all, I think wanting things to be different, wanting things to be good, wanting feels to feel good, wanting relationships not to have to be this painful blood and, death type of experience that I had every single time I had to go in and especially out of relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so true. I recently had a friend say that as well about the butterflies. That's actually anxiety. That's not love. Yeah. What do you think is the biggest blessing of being in a relationship, or of being in the relationship that you are in now?
Conscious choice to share your life with somebody else. I think the biggest blessing is this for me in this relationship is we don't really like I'm with you because of this or because of that. Of course, there are needs and there are some agendas that we have. Of course, everybody does. But I feel like this is not like ever before that I had no choice. I had to go in this relationship. It's like I decided I wanted to be in a relationship. I decided I want to be with you, and I'm deciding that I'm wanting to be in this relationship, and I'm deciding that I wanting to be with you, and we are deciding it day by day. We're deciding it month by month. We're deciding it season after season. So I think this kind of like a conscious thing rather than, oh, we have no choice, that's it. Because both of us were over 30 when we met. Both of
Mhm.
us, we had our fair share of, heartbreaks, turbulations. Both of us lived in another countries and, gone through some struggles. So, I think when people meet in their 20s, often it's kind of like, I just left, we had no choice. But in here it feels this is a choice. This is a conscious choice. And also I choose to love him. He chooses to love me. And I think that's the most beautiful thing in
Mm.
relationship.
Yeah.
I think also the beautiful thing is you find a part of yourself which you didn't find before, not in him, in yourself, because you are with him.
Mm.
Sometimes the part that you find at the beginning looks ugly. You're like, oh God, I have these reactions, I have these things. But then later you understand, oh, okay, this is out of feeling insecure, or this is out of feeling that I need more this or that. I feel like, especially because, let's say, at some point, or at least me and you, both of us, we chosen to be with someone who's not copy paste our versions. There are differences, there are some big differences in us. So there is a whole new opening in even knowing myself, doing things that I would have never done if I were not in this relationship,
Yeah.
understanding things about myself which I never understood. Also dropping some things which maybe I didn't need to carry for so long. Maybe
Yeah.
things that made my life just heavier and harder. So also the beautiful part is like when you genuinely know the other person. I'm not saying no totally, but you are the process of getting to know the human being, which is not like you, but who's with you, how they think, how they act, what's going on for them. Even the part that you mentioned about communication, like I communicate, this is how I communicate. Of course, this is understandable. And then you understand, oh, this is not received. I send it out. It message not received. Huh. Okay, let me see. Maybe I've been living in a a bit of isolation that everybody should receive if I send it like that. Okay, how do I package it in a different way? So it's interesting.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah. And absolutely, like, and one of the, let's say, patterns that I released recently, a few months ago, it started after my meditation retreat, actually, is timing and communication.
Ah, right.
It's so important. I find it important that sometimes when we have something in our hearts and minds that we want to share with our partner, we just go and pop their bubble And
Yeah.
we're like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then like we are really upset if the other doesn't receive our news or our question or cannot fulfill our need at that specific time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we have an argument maybe, and that mood all over. And it's like, wait a minute, is it really this urgent? What is my partner doing at this time? Is he or she actually receptive?
Yeah.
And for some reason, through that meditation practice, this sense of urgency that I always had, I don't want to say it's completely gone, but now I can watch it.
Mm-hmm.
And now I can be like, okay, maybe I'll wait with this piece of information. And sometimes, of course, there are some things where the timing is just never right. We all know that. But for most parts, it's like, or inquire, like ask, are you able to listen to me right now?
Yeah.
Like, are you sure you have that capacity right now? And then start a conversation instead of just, how to say it, overwhelm the other.
Yeah. Come in with the storm and the lightning and the rain and clouds over the sky. I know what you mean. Actually, I also think this is actually very much gender specific too. In a man and woman relationship, I'm kind of like, I guess I'm not a specialist in other type of relationship, so I can only speak for myself. But I actually found there are some rules that we as women, we are just such a sharing species. We're just so kind of like a networky, and this is in my heart, and my sister is gonna receive me, and yes, I got you, and so on. Now, when we are doing this to men, they're like, and they're kind of like a wall. It's like, oh my God, he's so cold. He doesn't understand me. He doesn't listen, blah, blah, blah. Recently, I also kind of figured out I was doing some webinars or workshops, and there was some kind of like a communication about men. First of all, never talk to men when he's hungry. This is not a priority. Talking is not a priority for him. It's such a simple rules that, we like, if we have something in our heart, so it's okay if we don't have a sandwich for another half an hour, we can talk about it. But for men, it's like, okay, basics must be there. So like you said, it's also, I think, is about awareness. Like, is the person open to receive? Is that energy of receiving? And then, do you need to say it right now? Do I need to say it right now? Does this need to be received this hot second, or I can time it better, and then I will save wasting my energy. And maybe there sometimes could be a conflict when, like, we communicate and it's not received. This can be avoided, and we can do it more effectively. So I agree with you. It's interesting though that this happened in meditation. How was it for you? Was it some kind of like a realization that was keep on popping up, or is it just
I just
feeling that?
noticed it.
Right.
It was just, I mean, it's the 10 days of silent meditation that I did. It just slows down your whole system. And I came back and I just noticed it. I'm like, oh, wait, interesting. I'm doing this differently. And it was very natural. It just happened, and it made communication so much easier. And I'm like, this is so nice. And my partner did Vipassana now too. And it's changing a lot. It's really doing something to your capacity to receive and to communicate, especially if you have a lot of things going on in your life, because it just helps the system to slow down. Before we wrap up, I feel like I have to drop another bombshell, and then
Right. Okay, let's do that.
Something that just came to me again the other day. I'm doing a lot of inner work these days. And it's, if we are into this law of attraction community, which most of us here are, or we've heard about it, if we believe in it, that implies that everything we have in our lives, we actually want, whether we are aware of it or not. And instead of going, I have to find that part that wants that and eradicate it, or heal it or fix it or whatever terminology we want to use, but it's kind of like we want that away.
Mm-hmm.
To just become really curious. And in terms of relationships, if you are with someone who's really jealous and controlling, for example,
Mm-hmm.
does this not give you a sense of I'm so important?
Yes, yes, definitely. It ticks that box and it meets that need. And coincidentally, I think just yesterday, I came across another very interesting idea about jealousy. Jealousy, very often, if we jealous, extremely jealous of our partner from whichever side, it means we at that moment are in a child mode. That's not to say we're childish and we're behaving in a child, but that means that the inner child in us wanting mommy, daddy. We feel we're gonna lose mommy, daddy, and that's probably something which we were missing in our childhood. So at that point, when we are jealous, we actually become child. We
Yeah.
become the children, maybe we had a sister or brother, or maybe mom or dad were at work, and maybe we didn't get as much attention. Emotionally, we kind of regress to that stage. We are adults, we are in
Yeah.
a woman body, but we regress in that stage. So I realized for me, jealousy was an issue too for me. And I think jealousy and control is so control is because we want to avoid that behavior. Control is we want to make things so that we would not have a reason to be jealous or we would feel safe. But I think it's very much to do with that inner child that really did not have these things. And I think if it happens, when it happens, best thing we can do is to have as big compassion as we can to ourselves, to what's happening to ourselves. I know it's very hard because
Mm-hmm.
I've been there. I still sometimes am triggered. And because at that point, that jealousy just feels like a very stinging type of sensation. It's
Mm-hmm.
very, very painful. It feels like I'm losing something right now. But if we are able to stay with us at that point, and you're right, it's like kind of, it's, it means part of us wants it. So we can say part of us wants that full attention. Part of us wants that unconditional presence.
I actually was speaking of being in the position of being with someone else who is jealous. So, for
Okay, the
example,
reverse.
yeah, and so you have the child mode on that one side who is
Right, yeah.
like, I have to hold on to this. And you have, well, also, I guess, child mode on the other side, who's like, oh, I'm really important to this other person
Yeah,
now because
yeah,
they want to hold on to me.
yeah.
So, and it's just a trick in your mind when you have these situations going on, instead of just focusing on resisting and, for example, working against the jealousy of your partner,
Mm-hmm,
to just feel, hey, what's actually happening? What's actually happening sensationally also in my body? And maybe this is actually something that I like.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And work with that. And instead of focusing outward on the thing that you don't want, focus inward and feel what's going on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's a perfect match. It's always match made in heaven. If you, it's like you have two villages of matches going on in two people. If we look at this separate aspect, so like from the other side, jealousy. Of course, there is a part who needs to be strongly acknowledged as important. There is a part that strongly needs to feel like I'm wanted, I'm needed, I am irreplaceable. The other person doesn't want other people to have me. Wow, I'm so powerfully, let's say, desired or owned, even,
Yeah.
which I think is ticking the box, is meeting the need.
Yeah. My dear, I'm so sorry, but we have to end this conversation. I could speak to you for another 5 hours. Every time we end, it feels like we just get started.
Yep.
I know you are very intuitive as well, and you have some psychic abilities as well. So is there something that you feel if you tune into maybe the people who will be listening to this that you want to share with them?
Yes. Yes, I do. Actually, two words that came into my mind was, okay, three maybe, or four. Be kind to yourself. And I think this comes in the context of relationship. So, for example, if something is hard for you, do not hate yourself for it. Do not push yourself. Be kind. Take your time, take your space, breathe, reflect, come back. If something is not working in your relationship and you're like, oh my God, I should probably be breaking up, but I really don't want to, don't. Wait, see, breathe, look into yourself, look into what's going on. Be kind to yourself. And if you don't do something perfectly, if you don't have a perfect relationship, or even if you don't have a relationship, it's okay. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself, and these things will happen to you. So I think this is my message, because now we're coming up to 25th. There's going to be some energies coming through strongly. So there might be some harsh things and circumstances, and there is no way to go through that if you are hard on yourself. So opposite, be kind to yourself and your partner. First to yourself, then to your partner.
Thank you. I loved feeling that energy, and good to know that there's something going on the 25th. I never know these things. I always find out later.
Don't worry, you'll feel it.
Thank you so much, my dear. If anyone has questions for Ruta or me or both of us, if you want to share something about your relationships, please feel free. There's absolutely no judgment, no matter what you will share. I will put all of Ruta's contacts in the show notes to this episode. And blessings to all of you, and always keep singing. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
This was the Sound of You podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me. If you are curious about voice activation, about healthy self-expression and healing, just send me a message on any of my platforms, because you deserve it.